it's an important part of the selling process. It's still people to people, right? But what's not helpful, not useful, is spending time entering information in the fields, double checking information, moving data around, analyzing data, all of these types of things. And so the version of 2 is that sort of stuff should just be handled by the software and the AI, and systems are going to talk to themselves. So it's going to take us out of the task and out in front of customers.
Hi, my name is Dimitri Benici, and I'm a content creator, agency owner, and AI enthusiast. You're listening to the AI Agents Podcast, brought to you by Jotform, and featuring our very own CEO and founder, Ida Contang. This is the show where artificial intelligence meets innovation, productivity, and the tools shaping the future of work. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the AI Agents Podcast. In this episode today, we have Jason Ambrose, who's the CEO of People.ai. How you doing today, Jason?
Pretty good, Dimitri. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. I'm really excited to chat a little bit more about what you got going on there at People.ai. But before we kind of get into that, obviously the world of AI is an interesting landscape. A lot of people have a cool background of getting into it, their experiences with how in general they felt like the AI world kind of came to them. What was your kind of story behind how you got into AI in the first place?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I've spent a lot of time in, sort of the RevTech go-to-market world, particularly in the world of CRM. And I think in that foundation of seeing how people used that product and the premise of people having to manually enter information and try to find answers, I always felt like it should be a lot better and it wasn't improving. So then as I saw AI start to hit and saw the possibilities, that's what really drew me to the space and to People.ai in particular, is thinking about, gosh, AI could do so much more for us to make us productive in the sales organization. And I had some exposure before that when I was in the world of fintech, but that was, I think, the primary driver for me to be interested and get involved. That a lot of the things that have been lingering for the past 15 years in RevTech and CRM are things that we can finally solve with AI.
Yeah, I would love to kind of hear a little bit more about what RevTech is specifically. I think I have a pretty good grasp on it, but maybe some of the audience doesn't.
I think it depends on who you ask and how you choose to interpret it.
Okay, right? What were you doing in RevTech then? What was your Let's just talk about you.
So, I guess to me, RevTech is everything around, supporting the go-to-market motion, right? So there's probably different categories, and maybe there's some purists who keep me more honest, but there's sort of the middle office stuff of CPQ and how do you get deals done and moving orders through the system. But CRM at its core, if you think of that as a core platform, is how do we make sure that we understand what's happening with our deals and our accounts, and how do we move that through the process and involve the sellers and everybody who supports them to do that. So if I think about that as the anchor to RevTech, because that's ultimately what's generating the sales that turn into revenue, then there's a lot of different niches that could hang off of it. And the marketing side, the top of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel, post-deal support, whatever else. But to me, I think it anchors around CRM as the core platform for selling and growing revenue.
Got it. Okay, so that was like how you first got that experience in there. Okay, yeah, because tech, it feels like tech kind of made this natural transition to AI. Anyone who's in the space kind of, adjusted. I mean, I was working in tech, then I started working. I was doing content for tech, now I'm doing content for AI. It just completely kind of moved in that direction. So then how did you end up at People.ai?
Yeah, so I got connected to Oleg, our founder, last year. It was fun coincidence that several people that I really liked that I worked with were working here, and they said, you should really talk to this guy. And because of my background and interest in the space, and for the reasons that I said, I was really interested in this company and this technology. So I worked quite a bit with Oleg on the strategy and looking at how much the space was changing and how that was creating opportunities for us. And then it just naturally evolved that there was an opportunity to come in and fill in for him. As I mentioned, there was just an incredible opportunity for him related to his home country in Ukraine, and felt like a natural transition for me to step into the role, given how long I'd been working with him on the strategy, how aligned we were on that, and our shared view of where AI was going to take the space and what the opportunity was for us at People.ai.
Okay. And what do you think is, I got taglines here all over the place with the website, but what do you use as a phrase to describe what People.ai does in a sentence or two?
Yeah, so we're focused on this idea of how to generate answers, right? So if you think about almost everything that we do in sales starts with the goal, whether it's the number for the quarter or it's a meeting or it's an email that you're sending. And you may have a set of questions of how do I get to that goal? Finding those answers can sometimes be really difficult, and AI needs to draw from context to do that. Once you have those answers, then you go take actions and you have a set of outcomes. Now, a lot of the energy in the space is around automating that back half of how do I take those answers? How do I write and send the email for you? Those types of questions, and maybe how do we track the outcomes? But the answers, turns out to be a really hard problem if you look beyond the numbers and into what's the activity and what's actually happening in the interactions with customers. So our job is to provide those answers based on how your sales team is interacting with your customers that help you through that at all levels of activity. So
Yeah.
Extending it a little bit, right? Historically, probably the next question is, okay, how do we get there and what's been our evolution? So we spent a lot of time around activity capture and providing AI that matches that to the CRM records, right? So in CRM, usually, you have these opportunity objects and you're trying to track what happened in a meeting, what happened in a phone call. Post-COVID, that got a lot easier because everything was happening on Zoom. And our evolution has been to work off of that foundation to add our own AI on top of it and surface that through our APIs or our MCP connection or some of our products to provide those answers. So probably a little longer than the tagline you were looking for, but I think it helps.
No, that was a good explanation. It's a primer to force you to try to say it in as least amount as possible, but you did good. The question I would have then is, what are kind of the main customers that you end up working with? Is it like, I see sales leaders, sellers, RevOps. What does like a common relationship look like between you and your customers and how they find you and that sort of thing? Like, what are they struggling with?
It's really, so we think about where you are in your journey with AI, right? So I think we probably all feel like the middle of the curve is this experimentation phase, right? And then the more mature folks like Red Hat, one of our customers, is well down the path of how they're adopting agents and they're adopting an AI in almost everything that they do. And then there are some people who are really just trying to get to experimentation and figure out what they want to do. We tend to have customers who are sort of in the middle or moving to that later phase of, okay, we understand what AI does and we have some ideas of how we want to do it, and we need to make this real. And when they have the experience of trying to do that without a platform that provides the answers that we do, they're the folks who get it and say, okay, we get it. We can't just throw LLMs at our emails and our calendar meetings and have that work. We need something else. But I think what's interesting to me is we have a very wide gamut of, we're selling to AI companies, people as forward as you can imagine, big names that are out there, to, an Iron Mountain that, does document destruction and digital data services that we wouldn't think of as being AI forward or on this journey, but they are. So that's been surprising to me, the mix of traditional businesses with, probably the most forward AI thinking businesses.
Yeah, traditional is an area that I think can benefit from this a lot. This upcoming year is, I think, a great opportunity for every business, but traditional businesses as well. It just seems to me that we all assumed knowledge work type stuff immediately had the biggest opportunities to be time saved. So that meant tech companies and knowledge work focused companies, but traditional companies as well still need those things solved.
Yeah. So like manufacturing, we see a lot of chip manufacturers. So I think folks who have sales processes that don't follow the traditional sales stages, or look like a SaaS selling motion. I think as a space we've sold to ourselves as a starting point most of the time, and so we've usually been the first adopters of new innovations that have come in technology related to go to market. But because of, like you said, the way that some of these traditional companies sell, and the fact that they haven't been up on this curve and they're not doing a bunch of stuff digitally, in some ways that does prepare them to lean in harder and get more benefit faster from AI if they're prepared to move that fast, which is, I think, what separates the movers from the followers in a lot of these verticals.
Yeah, I totally agree. What do you think? Obviously, we talked a little bit about some of the problems that you've solved, or that you solve for. What do you think is kind of a key differentiating factor between what you're doing and what other companies are attempting to do in the space?
Yeah, I think it's two parts. One is especially now, we're really leaning into this notion of providing the answers where you want them, right? So what I've noticed is a lot of customers want to get out of the walled garden idea, right? So companies that are trying to drive you into their user experience and force you to buy all of the products underneath that and sort of lock in salespeople into that experience. Customers don't want that anymore, right? The build buy equation is changing. The best of breed versus one-stop vendor shops, that's also changing, right? So they want openness. They want to be able to build their own agents or buy specialized AI that focuses in certain areas of their business, and they want on their own to figure out how that should come together for sellers, right? I think the second piece is it's just the output, the quality of the output of what we generate. It's hard work, right? So we have our own AI that we've built, and it's very difficult to process a lot of this qualitative information and get answers that are actionable, right? So an example would be, what's the risk on a sales deal that I have, right? You can take AI in a generic sense or with some of these platforms, and it'll tell you something like, okay, you need to build trust with your stakeholders. What does that mean? What do I go do, right? But being able to process the information and say, okay, the CISO has concerns about GDPR and your ability to protect personal information, so you need to deliver them this content that explains our story of how we handle GDPR, and then you need to triangulate with your business side so that the business side makes sure that security is comfortable. Like, that's an actionable set of answers, right? So we're moving toward and aspiring to that quality, not just to humans but agents, because as you try to automate some of these higher level sales activities, you need answers that are more qualitative and have deeper context than just like yes, no answers.
Yeah, would you say that's something that I think AI is at this stage where a lot of people are questioning its ability to do those qualitative answers versus just like basic generic tasks. What do you think kind of the future is in your specific industry and what you're trying to solve for with the capabilities of that improving, and where do you think it sits now, maybe relative to where people would hope it is?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, as you said, as they're coming out of this experimentation journey, they're learning it can't do everything, right? We're getting through that. What exactly should it do, and what is it good at, and therefore what is the need for having some of these answers? I think our aspiration is at all levels of the organization, they're getting quicker and faster answers that are moving them into actions that help them de-risk and achieve better success. So the agents will take a lot more of this low-level activity off the plates as you get lower in the organization. So Matt, the CEO at Red Hat, talked about, like, this is what they're experiencing as he's finding automation gets down at the sort of individual contributor level, and they're seeing a lot of benefit there. But bringing reasoning in and chain of thought models becomes a lot more important higher in the organization, because they're dealing with bigger and more abstract questions. So what those models need is the proper context to be able to reason through the questions they're being asked, right? So we want to sort of take AI up from the let's write and send emails from you to the what's my plan for the year at a CEO or CRO level, and what are the major risks that we need to address in doing that. And so that end-to-end architecture moves from automation at the lowest levels, which is still important and impactful, to uh, deeper strategic reasoning type questions. And as these chain of thought models improve and as people get proficient with it, that experience for executives and the kinds of questions and productivity that AI is generating will be higher level, essentially.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. Every different founder, every different CEO person that's running companies like these has a unique perspective on where things are kind of at, especially with how their customers perceive where things are at, and trying to bridge that knowledge gap between what is possible in AI with their expectations and what you can provide is always an interesting little battle, I feel like, that you're fighting as a company like this.
Yeah, sort of into your question on like where are the gaps, right? I think to that point, it's aligning the expectations, but then also thinking a bit differently about how fast you can move on some of this stuff. And I think right now there's a pretty quick step to staying with sort of a human in the loop model and starting to experiment with this stuff. But there's still people who feel like we can automate away everything and we can hand it all over. And I think that disconnect is maybe stalling or slowing people down. And if they just focused on a more pragmatic approach to let's keep people involved, let's try to work this through and get us all habituated to using AI at all levels, like there's plenty to do there and plenty of benefit to get there with that piece.
Yeah, I think human in the loop is something that was talked about for a little bit. I do feel like there was a level of like for some reason pause in people understanding that was kind of a requirement to be the case for things as models continue to get better, right? They started to make bigger assumptions on complete follow through capability. Like it went from, I think what happened maybe, and you can maybe speak to this a little bit, is that reasoning got really good. So people were like, oh, look how smart the thing is.
Yeah.
And I think at a similar level, just like with creative writing, because this is still the case, early on, we're at like 85% of the way there with a lot of things. And then it would take someone to do 20%. So then when it got really good with reasoning, the number of tasks expanded within that quote 80% of like there, and now we're maybe closer to 85-90% ish with more tasks, not all tasks but more tasks, and people are now then assuming that since it's more capable, that means that it's past that 90% to 100, so to speak, maybe.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Part of what I heard and what you're saying is, as it's had these capabilities, they're sort of drawing more things in that they're trying to solve, and maybe those things are more complex. And maybe mentally assuming that they're getting to 90 or 100 on the stuff they were doing, they're adding new things that are sort of keeping you in that 80 to 85%, right? And
yeah, exactly.
I think there's some truth to that, in that as we go to these more complex tasks, especially in an enterprise, I think the straightforward stuff that we first started using the LLMs on, they could get good results because they're just finding the patterns from, sort of public domain information. And we're moving into more that requires proprietary context of what's happening in these enterprises. That's where there needs to be a complement. We talk about this idea of expert agents, right? So you have a first agent, could be Claude, could be ChatGPT, and that's your sort of smart intern that it will go find out a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't really know much, about how to work in your organization. And it needs the expert agents in different parts of the functions to tell it, this is how we price, this is how we do deals, right? This is how we generate leads or whatever else. And so to your point, as customers go to these more complex tasks, they need more support from those types of agents, which either comes from humans staying in the loop and putting in more time, or there's a different set of AI capabilities that has to provide that to that, sort of gating agent at the front end of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. The sort of director agents that we've seen and orchestrator agents that we've seen over the last few months, because agents wasn't even a term like a year ago.
Yeah.
When I started this podcast a year ago was when the term at first even had any conversational weight whatsoever, and it was minimal because even I didn't even know what the heck I was talking about the topic because it was so new. I did want to kind of dive in a little bit more into some potential maybe clients you've worked with or stuff you've done. It seems like you've had some really cool and interesting success. If I'm not wrong, you guys did raise a couple of years ago like 100 million. Is that correct? In funding?
Yeah, it wasn't quite that much, but yeah, it was a couple of years ago. We had a pretty big round. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No. So you guys have had the early portion of the AI world or not early portion, the like early timeline, right, to build out something. I'm very curious, kind of like as this has evolved, right, as AI has continued to improve.
Yeah.
Where you saw maybe some, I know you earlier on in the company, but where you guys kind of tracked your progress as to like, well, we added this, and how you've managed to kind of stay up with the trends of the models improving and capabilities of AI enhancing.
So I have this sort of like fake brag joke of, we were AI before it was cool, right?
It sounds like it.
Yeah. Well, it creates a challenge, right? So, Oleg was, our founder he was in the Y Combinator class with Sam Altman so that he could see what was coming there. And I think even in those days, he had a sense that this could be a possibility. The question was when and what would the timing be, right? And to your point on the journey, we started on this data element because we understood that capturing and gathering this activity, was, valuable 7, 8, even today, years ago, for humans who are still working within CRM. And then the question would be, what would be the progression for AI to take some of the use of CRM that would move out of the system, and what would that mean for our product? So we spent a lot of time on this data question, which is a hard problem to solve. And then what we found is like, okay, it wasn't enough because the market certainly wasn't ready for AI yet in a sort of front end experience that could see the benefits of having better data, but was that enough? And then we went into visualization of let's show the results, that have them interact with the information in a way, again, still humans who are looking for these answers, right? Then when the LLMs did come out, we started figuring out how to use them paired with our data and with our own models and AI to, okay, now how do we distill this information into a set of answers that are useful still to humans, right? And that was still, I think the market was still trying to understand exactly what these LLMs did. We embedded it in our product and in CRM. It led us to forecasting, which is a sort of more direct application of this to say, okay, when you build a forecast, you want to know what the risks are, and you want your platform to go bottom up on a deal by deal basis to tell you what's happening there. So that was like a practical application that could bring it to life. The big unlock for us in the past year has been MCP, right? So even at the start of the year, a lot of people couldn't spell MCP, let alone, to your point around agents before, understand what it really meant. But when we could bring that to life and have people use Claude to ask questions that then ask its own set of questions to our platform to get really deep and meaningful answers, that's been the aha moment right now. And frankly, for us, we're just in the transition to really lean into that. But there's some incredible stuff that we can do with the product now that we're starting to see show up with our customers. So to your point on the way that we work with customers, so Red Hat, Matt uses it every day, right? He's got Goose hooked up, which is a sort of open source version of an LLM, and he asks questions at his level to understand what's happening in the business. We've done things like, I've myself have taken our WinWire form, which basically says, why did we win this deal? Fed it in and said, go fill this out for the sales rep. And it does an awesome job. And that's just a tactical thing, but these are all the kind of use cases that we're just now seeing that open up where you can go agent to agent.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And let's talk a little bit more about agents.
Yeah.
When were you guys, I guess, when you guys are, working through what you guys are doing, just want to learn a little bit more how the product actually functions itself. How How does the end user kind of interact with the agents that you have, and where do they sit in the process? Because, big question for everybody is how do I interact with the AI? Is it going to replace me at certain levels of the job so I don't have to do the work, or is it going to replace me overall? Like, just trying to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it gets back to the point of this is why we're opening it up, because there's a lot of different ways that customers want to be able to interact with our system. So let's start with, humans versus agents, right? Two different ways to ask questions and get answers, right? So on the human side, we embed that in places like CRM. So it's sitting alongside the record. So if you're looking at an opportunity in CRM, sort of a chat interface where you can say, okay, who are the key stakeholders in this deal and what's their position on our product, things like that. So it's a way to get the full story of what you're seeing in the records. And that's in a different UX. We have our own user experience for looking at things like, your overall deals. That's called Glass. And it's sort of like a simple interface, but the AI is tightly embedded with that for people who want to start with the structured data and understand, the answers from the unstructured data that give them a better view of what that means. But we also do it through APIs, so you can build your own UX. You can surface it up wherever you want, right? So that's kind of the human side. The agentic side, first and foremost, MCP, right? So that agent can effectively ask questions of it in the same way that a human would in a chat interface. And it's really cool to see the chain of thought from Claude or the others that interacts with it to get the true answer that you're asking at the start of the prompt, right? We also have just APIs, so they can talk directly, or we can trigger workflows based on the answers and the reasons come out. So that's an interesting place where agents might ask questions of us that then prompt us to send triggers to workflows or the other way around. So a bit deeper in the sort of orchestration and automation area that you might find agents.
Yeah, let's talk about MCP a little bit further. I'd love to hear more about that, because that is, to me, one of the big unlocks for products like yourself in the last couple months.
I totally agree. And what I think is really compelling about it for us and our customers is, if you start with this idea of a question and an answer, we don't have to burn a bunch of roadmap to build the capabilities, right? It's just as simple as just go ask it another set of questions and let it reason through how to go get those answers. So I think if I step all the way back to like software and how we've thought about this, is like we had to think about and understand the ways to use and build a user experience and workflows, and really sort of explicitly codify it in our products. But now what changes is the things that I want as a user just start with a question and the AIs figure it out, right? The chain of thought on one side takes your one question into the right 40 questions or whatever to go ask our model, our platform, and our platform is set up to respond to that. So it really opens up the way that you think about using AI, because it's not a big rollout. It's not a big new product SKU or whatever else. It's the same thing. It's just you're sitting in Claude and asking these questions, right? And same thing for pointing agents to it, right? You can point whatever agents you want and they can ask their questions and get what they need through MCP and, whatever the client might be. And the reason you might have a different client in MCP that is working through a different set of information to talk to our server or other servers, it's setting up this world of really, deeper interactions between AI that don't have to be explicitly built and connected in the same way that you got to wire an API to something on the other end. Right? You just show up at MCP, it asks its questions, it understands what type of questions it can ask, and off it goes.
Yeah, no, that makes me think a little bit more deeply on it. I love the comment you made there about Claude and just interacting with it. An example I gave on a previous interview was trying to help more people like yourself get on more podcasts with my experience in this space, doing like a new PR service. And because I was receiving a lot of emails that felt like they were, for getting people on the show. And I was like, I wonder how well I could do that, because I have great outreach capabilities with my AI centered mindset. I feel like the PR space is a little bit behind there, to be a little honest. So at first I asked an employee, I was like, you know what, hey, could you go check out all the recent emails I've received from these PR agencies about potential guests and check out what they're doing, what they're offering service wise, see how maybe there's a gap there between services provided and services that we could provide as well. And I then 20 minutes later realized, because this is around when MCP came out, to be inside, like for Gmail specifically, inside of Claude. And I just went to myself and I said, and I took what I asked him and just pasted it into Claude, and it did it. And then I just laughed and I was like, hey man, I don't need you to do this. We're fine. Like, it would have taken him the whole day if he didn't use AI, right? But instead he parsed out the recent emails. It scraped their websites. It then just asked me, well, what are you providing service-wise? I told a couple different things. Like, it's crazy. If you literally change your mindset from let me voice note or let me talk to somebody to let me voice note to AI that's connected to the tools that have access to my information, you become just a completely different level of productive. It's wild.
Totally. So I had a really interesting walk when I first started doing this of, we wanted to write this case study on a customer, right? And, historically, that's a lot of work. Is somebody has to go talk to the AI and the account team and find out everything that's happening. And somebody sits and writes it down. And it's a salesperson she's not getting paid to write book reports, right? She's getting paid to sell deals. So it takes a long time to do. And the team is like, well, this would be 4 weeks. And while we were sitting there, I was like, it's just curious. Let me ask Claude and have it talk to our product and see what it could do. It built out this beautiful case study. I sent it to the rep. Right. Like, that's exactly right. Right. But then I took that and thought, could I turn this into a post? Right. And then, so I asked it to look at my style of posts, and then it drafted something that was pretty good. Right. And then I said, gosh, it feels like this would be a good story to share with a particular contact. So see my email interactions with this contact and draft something that's sort of appropriate in the flow based on this as source content, right? So like, it was just this walkthrough, to your point, all these different things that you do on a daily basis that if you habituate to just keep coming back and using the tool to do this stuff, you find, boy, there's a lot of stuff that just happens faster and gets easier, right?
Yes, it's very compelling when it manages to kind of work its magic on you. Like when you start to experience this properly, you're mind boggled, right? Like in that, like, I really like it. I think it's a very positive, thing to experience and use. There are concerns that people have though, right? I'm curious kind of where you stand on this place of, what is AI going to kind of do to the market from a job perspective? People are in a couple of camps. There's 3 I've identified answer-wise that I've received. One is doomsday. That's the only way I could describe that. 2 is it's going to save us a lot of time at work to do more high quality thinking and actual work versus nonsensical click-clack BS. Mm-hmm. And then the 3rd category is, sure, there will be lost jobs, but then it will just make a bunch of very high-focused solo entrepreneurs or small businesses with very niche, good products. So the latter 2 are a little bit more on the optimistic standpoint. I fall somewhere between 2 and 3. Some industries will just lay people off, okay? But I think the people who have it within them will just be like, you know what, I'm going to make something specific. And then the people remaining at the working places will just be doing much less grunt work type stuff. That's where I sit. What do you kind of think about how it's going to play out?
So it's probably a different version of 2 and 3 to an extent, right? So we talk about this internally as, sort of leading into our brand a little bit of, we believe that people will work with people and AI does the rest, right? So especially in a sales organization, you're wired to spend time and talk to people. That's what you like doing. And it's an important part of the selling process. It's still people to people, right? But what's not helpful and not useful is spending time entering information into fields, double checking information, moving data around, analyzing data, all of these types of things. And so the version of 2 is that sort of stuff should just be handled by the software and the AI, and the systems are going to talk to themselves, and that's going to take us out of the tabs and out in front of customers. Right now, the way that I think that becomes a version of 3 is, maybe there is some independence. I think certain roles, like anything that's like specialized content generation, those types of things, yeah, you could be super productive across a number of customers, and they probably can't keep you busy, forever, right? Indefinitely. So it doesn't make sense for you to be in-house versus coming in on a project basis. Probably more of the latter for some of those roles. But the human to human roles, maybe it's reasoning, but more communication and interaction. Like, this is still a fundamental part of business, right? Even what we're doing here, right? This is you and me talking, right? Could we have a bot on either side of us? Maybe, but that feels, Terminator 2 and really not that interesting, right? Like, I think we're still social creatures and we want that interaction at all parts of the business cycle. So I see humans leaning into that stuff. It's rich context, the things that we're wired to do in terms of pattern recognition and understanding how people are communicating, still very important. Hard to put in the hands of AI, but what AI is good at is information retrieval, processing, all of that stuff. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Like, I'm just imagining even earlier in my experience of a career that was still obviously very short. It's kind of like, I'm imagining what it can be like in the future versus what it's like now. And I wouldn't like much to change practically outside of like nonsensical tasks be removed and something is kind of helping me do the little things that I don't want to do click clack wise. And, like the Terminators type stuff, I try to stick away from that in my head. Like, I don't think that practically we're ever going to get into a world where it's going to be doomsday, even from a work perspective, right? Like, there's one of my favorite, what's the name of it? In Praise of Idleness. It was an article written by Bertrand Russell in the 1919. I always forget. It was essentially 1932. It was immediately after World War I ended, or a couple years after. His entire premise or thesis was like, the world is going to not work much. Just wait. Now, the reason that he said this was because we just had a entire world war and where half the workforce didn't exist and we're arbitrarily blowing each other up. Yeah. And he was basically saying like, all this manufacturing was done. Look at all these automations. He uses the term a lot actually because of the fact that mechanical automation was occurring at that time.
Yeah.
He's predicting this decrease in work. He's predicting this increase in leisure. That's why it's called In Praise of Idleness.
Interesting.
It's been 100 years.
He was a precursor to the Elon, like, it'll all be great. Yes. We'll be on UBI and nobody has to.
Yeah. So this has been a predicted possible thing since the 1930s that was supposed to be done by now. Right. So like this commentary that people are saying, right, because of AI, and I'm not saying that it can't occur. I'm just putting this level of context of like, well, but prior to knowing that we could interact with a computer, right? Like there's been stages of this, right? We went from mechanical to the old version of computer, which was like binary. And then we had the mouse clicking computer. Then we got automations and APIs. Now we have AI. I'm like, I don't know if anyone's going to properly predict the next tangential move where we will still find a way to have ourselves working 40 hours a week. Right? This has been a thing for like hundreds of years at this point. If you go prior to the mechanical, it was the physical labor so anyways.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, you're right. I think we'll lose sight of that. It's just the next thing. I mean, you could probably, sure, there were thought processes that said, oh, when the fax machine is here, all these jobs are going to go away. I do remember this when the internet came out, like, oh my gosh, like all this stuff is going to change. And I think jobs just change, right? And so I think to where we agree on this idea of more in 2 and 3 versus 1, that probably supports that to say, look, we've been through this cycle before. Maybe this time it's different, right? But it seems unlikely because history tends to repeat itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a nice way to kind of put that into context as a positive spin, because very quickly I have a lot of family, a lot of friends that are like, "Oh, you're working in AI?" You know, like it's like, "What are you concerned?" And I'm like, "Guys, like you still have banks that just got off of using servers for their trading platforms, managing billions of dollars. I do not want to hear this like insanity that you think every company is going to magically adopt the full power of AI in the next like 5 years. Like people are they're so slow to adopt anyways. Like the people with the money are going to be late, which is funny.
There's still physical paper moving the economy.
Yeah. My dad works in finance, and they just moved off of a server-based system, like a physical server-based system, instead of cloud for trading.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's 2025.
Do you know how much insurance is still running on mainframes out there? Like, you know,
that's my point. Yeah, like we're all the big money. Sure, big money in tech is gonna probably be able to handle this transition quickly, but nobody else.
Yeah.
And those who do will succeed, and it'll go great, but it's not going to be everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think part of what drives this is the pace of innovation is so fast, and just the experience of what comes out looks so impressive and compelling. That's what generates a lot of excitement, but at the same time, oh my gosh. But when you really start sitting with it and working with this output, and you get a sense of the limitations, and there's much harder work to get through to do some of these things, you can see, okay, the horizons are going to be a bit longer. The value is going to be super high, short-term, medium, long-term, but we're in a longer arc than it feels like when, you know, LLMs have a brand new model every month, and, you know, the league charts on DeepSeek versus OpenAI versus Anthropic feels like it shifts dramatically, you know, in the span of a few weeks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a question that's more on a personal note in regards to your experience with AI. What do you think is, for you, actually two questions. One, what's kind of got you most interested AI-wise right now? I know that it seems like there's a lot of stuff that you can do with AI now on a daily basis, and everyone's focused on their little category. Like what to you, when you're using AI on a daily basis, gets you the most excited? And then follow up, is there a specific product that gets you the most excited that you use all the time? I'm trying to ask all these like important people, like, what do you use? You know, because if you're AI first and you're a smart person, I feel like it's fair to hear. I've heard a lot of new ones every week that I ask this question.
Yeah, I wish I could say something that didn't feel like I'm a bit of a homer on this question, but I really am excited about what we do with the product, and almost every day. So like, I'll give an example, right? Because I'll try to make this as generalized as possible in this, because it really isn't a pitch. It's like what I personally believe. But like,
Sure.
We were just talking with Kimberly, my head of marketing, about events, right? And the problem with events is like, how do you measure value all the time, right? So, you know, you go to a trade show, or you have a webinar. You know, historically, we've had this idea of influence revenue. Everybody feels like it's because you touched an opportunity, right? How do I know that, like, the real impact of that? That's absent anything else. But in what we do, I can say, okay, I know this person from this Ford, I'll just pick an account, right? Attended our event. Maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's an in-person event. And we have some context of what they were exposed to in that, right? Now I can take that to our AI and say, hey, you know, Jim Farley showed up at our events and talked about these things. What happened after that, right? So I can see, did he now show up and he was talking about our forecasting product or not? Did he introduce us to other people in an organization? Like, how did this actually show up in our interactions with that customer? And how do we think differently about measuring success of these events, as opposed to, you know, basically the reason CFOs try to go for influence revenue is they always say, what's the ROI, when they don't understand the value of something, right? And now you can say, look, I can have qualitative, contextual answers about what's happening that really help change and solve a lot of problems that were difficult to solve before, right? And this is not just our product. I think this idea of expert agents that build and deliver all this context, from the proprietary information that's happening in an enterprise to solve some of these challenges with a front end agent that's making it easier for you and I to ask questions, work through, have something that supports us get to a right set of questions that solves these things. Like all the ways that we can apply that basic framework of a proprietary expert agent that has deep understanding of a certain set of skills and the specifics of a company with these generalized capabilities at the top, like that interaction to me is what's super exciting, because I keep trying stuff and being surprised at how well it works. Right?
Sure. Yeah. Now, outside of your own product,
Yeah.
what's something you like? What's something you like using?
Yeah, like I think I'm still in the, it's just really fun to watch what's going on with the LLMs, right? And that's
okay, that's fine.
Everything that's happening in the front end of that process, it's causing us to think about how does this redefine the way that we all interact with technology. And this is a interesting but also exciting way to think about your question, right? So let's take a salesperson versus a CRO, right? The CRO really deals with unstructured. Like they don't want to be sitting in dashboards. They don't want to do this stuff. They do because they have to. They just want to get quick. Like Claude is a very natural experience for them, and it's great. Like I can just ask a question. Maybe they need to get better at like understanding how to write the questions, but they don't need all this visualization because they're not having to process information. They never did, and they don't want to, right? But a seller does have to work with structured information, and this could be true in different roles. And so what is the blend of what comes out of the LLMs plus what comes out of structured quantitative data, which we know the LLMs are bad at? How do you blend those two together to make something that's really productive for people? I think as the LLMs and that front end experience matures, you're going to see more blending of the user experience between interaction with structured data and sort of this chat interface that I think is going to start to become a really exciting way for people to interact with information and data. And I think you're starting to see that as they get into creating some of these other assets. Still a long way to go on, videos and presentations or whatever else, but where this is headed as this is my one-stop shop for everything that I need from information, like that's still exciting to me to stay on top of an experience and figure out how to apply and how I work and how our product works. I think just the pace of innovation that these vendors are putting out is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. And all the little like nooks and crannies of capabilities that I feel like they're competing with each other on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of to your point. Is like it's really fun to watch the arms race of like they're really
like it's been fun to watch. I think Claude and Google have really had such a comeback. In this, well, I mean, Google, the main comeback, Claude like came out of, the woodwork pretty strong, but I think it's crazy that like, Google is so incredible when a lot of people had to down it out after, I mean, they had the wrong name first it was Bard, then it was Gemini. First Gemini version was awful. Claude came out pretty strong, was the best sounding writing wise. GPT was leading for a while. And then now like, I don't know if you saw GPT 5.2 after GPT-5 was a debacle. GPT 5.2 is good at coding, but the everyday use, people were once again freaking out, asking a genuine question. How did you manage to make 5.2 worse than 4.0 for like daily task usage? Right. Yeah. Now, the advanced stuff, it's really cool and you can make presentations and spreadsheets, but just daily chatting with it. Not once again, there's people are having the same freak out again as with 5. So it's like they came out with 5.1, they fixed it. And then Sam's is saying he's in code red and then he releases 5.2. It's like that has been fun to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's, we're watching the canvas get painted on a lot of these things, right? And so sometimes it's a little hard of, you look at the pencil sketch and they haven't really inked anything in all the way, but you're expecting to see the finished product, because they have to race and show that they're getting stuff out there and they're keeping pace. So, hey, maybe the way to think about it is 5 and 5.2 are setting the stage for 6 or whatever they want to call it. That
sure
then is the catch up. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, I think it's back to the point of like how much the league tables change when somebody has a new release, right? To your point, like Google earlier this year, nobody was even really talking about, and now everybody's saying they're at the top of the list, right? Again,
yeah, I think people who are really in the know saw that the like the issues were actually not that bad for Google, and they had made big strides with 2.5.
Yeah.
But that, what I was trying to point out is the sentiment drives so much of the narrative. And with Google's 5 flop, people are just distrusting at this point. Until they overcome it, they will be distrusted. So, all right. Well, this was actually longer than I expected, but I appreciate the convo. It was really fun, man. Last thing I just asked to close things out is, where can people find what you guys are doing?
Yeah, People.ai. That's back to doing this before it was cool. We've got a pretty easy URL to remember, but the website, you can hit me up on LinkedIn too if you got specific questions. But come find us there.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We appreciate your time. And everyone, please make sure to check out everything Jason and People.ai are doing at People.ai. That is literally the most simple domain, People.ai. They probably got it prior to when it was expensive. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.